I was just looking there. Some few people were calling me a Satanist again. Satanic. Yeah. Why the title of this video is Why I'm Not a Satanist. Now, I really like Satanism. I think Satanism has a lot going for it, but it has one vital aspect missing to it, and that is the reason why I'm not a Satanist. Now, this Satanism is essentially a ritualized form of atheism that puts human rights and humanism ahead of all else. So therefore, it's very about the humanistic approach, which is a good thing, a good way to live. So it respects freedom of speech, people's rights to have a private life between consenting adults in their own home, that you can do anything you want sexually once you're not hurting another person or a child. You try to strive to do the right thing in life. You accept that science is the primary arbiter of Western civilization in terms of how civilization should be proceeded with. So therefore they're very much into reductionist science, and people like Carl Sagan are big heroes to Satanists. They're very much involved in the idea of justice, both natural law and judicial justice. The Satanists generally tend to be quite well-educated people, mostly decent people, and what I do like about them is that humour plays a big part in their lives. They're very funny when it comes to memes and things like this. Humour is a big part of it. And LaVey Satanism, and then what you would probably call the Agnostic Satanism of today, kind of addressed the element that Crowley said was missing in modern magical traditions, that being humour. But then they're not magical, they're atheistic in scope. Anton LaVey, while the Satanic Bible is a very good read and there's a lot of great wisdom in it, he was also very funny. The way he dressed, he trolled everybody by dressing up like a Batman devil's outfit. That was just to wind up idiots, and they were, God, where they wound up, posing with naked chicks in his arms and women on altars and inverted pentagrams and Baphomet and all this stuff. That was just purely to troll the evangelical Christians, and it was hilarious in this day. But he sometimes came across as not as intellectual as he made himself out to be, and most of his kids aren't, except Zena LaVey, who's now a Buddhist. She was a fine-looking girl back in... she probably still is, but I mean, she probably did more to bring fellas into Satanism than anyone. She'd be on shows like daytime talk shows in America, looking absolutely gorgeous, and talking very good common sense, very articulate, extremely intelligent, very appealing, very beautiful eyes and everything, and very striking looking. But also the intellectual nature was amazing, very calm and rational and approached. And she was probably did more to bring people into LaVey Satanism than anyone, along with himself. Then you had, since then, what I said, it's this kind of postmodern Satanism. It doesn't really have a formal structure. It doesn't appeal to any particular system of ritual or anything. It's just a belief that it's basically an attack on Abrahamic religions, or, well, the inverse of that. So that's, a lot of positives there. And normally, I would say, the times in my life I flirtated with atheistic things back in the day, I would have probably jumped on Satanism if it was more accessible then. And I read the Devil's Bible, and I liked a lot of it, but I did. The problem was, The reason why I'm not a Satanist is because one enormous factor is missing from it. Spiritual identity. That's missing from it. It does not believe that there's a spirit or a soul as such, that everything is, in terms of that, can be explained away or reasoned away with things like psychology and neuroscience. So therefore it flutters on the edge of being a bit dangerous in the terms of reducing people just down to machines. So, you know, and the spiritual dimension and the need for ritual. See, Anton LaVey did an inverse ritual of the Celtic triumphanthem Mass. I can't pronounce it. Tridentine Mass. He did an inverse ritual of the Catholic Tridentine Mass as a mockery, as a pageant, as a farce. So that was kind of appealing, but it was still ultimately atheistic. The Luciferian path that I follow, the pagan Luciferian path, has much of the same concepts of social justice within reason. This means that's the same thing as social justice warrior, and human rights appreciation and promotion, with a strong emphasis on the natural cycles of the world and the cosmos and the universe, and connecting those natural cycles to the archetypes and the dynamics of the subconscious mind, the psyche, the soul, whatever you want to call it. There is a spiritual dimension. Now, if you'd asked me what a spiritual dimension is, it is the unseen force that can't be quantified by the five senses, nor can it be observed directly through a scientific process. But it is the supernatural prerogative that drives me and my interest in my hobbies, my art, and everything else, my interest in nature. And that's very, very much and very deeply a spiritual dynamic. And this to me is like not done through a belief in a deity because I have a faith in the deity. Those deities like Lucifer, the ones I relate to, Lucifer, Demoric, and Athena, they appeal to me because the archetypes that they represent appeal to me personally. And in a few years, I could move on to something else. Now, or incorporate more into that pantheon, the personalized pantheon. And that's where I think where Satanism fell down big time, is that it got too atheistic in its notions. Now, there's another aspect to this as well, is that Satanism is not very attached to nature. So it tends to be an urban. It was in the Temple of Seth in San Francisco, I think, or LA. It tends to be very urban in nature, where if you're more in a communion with nature and natural cycles, you are less likely to be atheistic, because you understand that there's something profoundly magical about the existence of life. Like I saw a lecture I went to a lecture in the US recently, and a marine biologist took out a protein jar of those kind of shakes that you get from the health food shop for bodybuilders, and then said everything that's in this container has everything needed to make life, to make a living thing. But she says there's no life in here. The difference between this and life are two different things. She said that science doesn't understand how life comes about. There's theories, but they don't prove anything. Well, what makes life comes about is the spirit, is the soul. Call it anything you want, but that's what makes life come about. And that factor, that life factor, that consciousness factor, would be the primary reason that I really wasn't interested in Satanism in terms of pursuing it as a lifestyle, because it didn't account for the spiritual dimensions of human beings, and it also, because of its urbanized nature, wasn't properly connected to the cycles of the natural world and the cosmos. You cannot be in the countryside or stand on a beach at night and look up at a million stars and not fail to be awestruck by it. You can't have that in a city. That's why cities tend to be full of Satanists. And finally, they said there was no spiritual dimension, and there was no, and also the concept that it doesn't really allow for supernaturalism, and a belief in supernaturalism, even if it's any kind of paranormal or anything, it makes life much more interesting. This is one of the things these materialistic atheists don't understand. People are into things like ghosts and hauntings and UFOs and Fortean and paranormal phenomena because it's very, very enjoyable. It makes life fun, and they want to take away the fun. And the real reason why that makes that fun is because the person involved or interested in that stuff is reaching for something beyond that of the material being. And that's ultimately what traps Satanism. If the Satanist is trapped in the world of the machine. I'm not only interested in the machine, I'm interested in the ghost in the machine too. So that's why I am not a Satanist.